Brandon Pflieger is an experienced operations professional with a strong track record driving organizational success. Over the years, he's held a variety of leadership roles focused on improving processes and building high-performing collaborative cultures. His expertise spans business development, human resources, and financial management, areas where he's consistently delivered measurable results. He's passionate about creating strategies that translate vision into sustainable growth and lasting impact. And welcome to another episode of Freelancer Training on how to find more direct clients, a podcast hosted by myself, Jason Willis-Lee. This is the show that makes digital marketing easier and more fun using the perfect combo and just the right dose of business strategy and tech. I'm your host, Jason Willis-Lee, medical translator and digital marketing enthusiast. And today I'm very thrilled and excited to welcome a special guest on the show. His name is Brandon Pflieger. Brandon brings a unique perspective to our discussion. Brandon, welcome to the show. How are you today, and where are you speaking from?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jason. I am in Alexandria, Virginia, and I'm impressed you got my last name right there.
Well,
It's tough for some people.
that's not what I see you have there. You have Brandon McKee, which I'm guessing is your maybe your husband's surname.
My Yeah, I just took
Um,
my husband's last name, but it throws people a lot. So
I
nice
was a
job.
little thrown because I saw Flieger on my cheat sheet and then McKee, and I thought, oh my gosh, have I just made a massive mess? Anyway,
No, you
yeah,
got it.
thank you so much for coming for your time and coming and sharing your insights. Could you just sort of do an icebreaker and say what is it that you do, and the main thing, what audience do you serve, and what is the transformation and the outcome of working with you?
Sure, yeah. Well, I like to kind of say I'm a recovering marketing executive, Jason. So I used to run a big marketing firm and kept waking up every day and just didn't love what I was doing. Good people around me, it just wasn't for me. So I decided to get out of that, get back into fitness. Actually, I opened up a couple of fitness studios. So I kind of have my own business on the side there. But really, what I'm doing right now is small business consulting. I work with startups and or businesses that are maybe struggling a little bit, and we help them turn around. That company's Capital Growth Partners, and we're about 2 years in, and we're affecting a lot of small businesses, and I really like that niche just because that 0 to 1 million I think is kind of ignored in this space, just because there's not as much cash, so to speak, for the big consultants out there. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing up till now.
That sounds amazing. Well, I have a small business, and most of my audience, if not all of my audience, have small businesses. So this is just you're just a perfect guest for the show. We talk about lead generation, personal branding. I'm pivoting my business from a more AI sensitive niche that is medical translation to a less AI sensitive, which is linguistic validation of clinical trials. So
Nice.
let's just talk about these things, Brandon. So many solopreneurs just try and scale by just taking on more clients, more. But that often leads to burnout instead of, looking
Yeah.
after our bodies and mental health. What business systems or mindset shifts do you recommend to your clients to help solopreneurs like myself grow sustainably?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, Jason, is trying to work smarter, not harder. And a lot of times when I'm talking to a small business and even like the really micro small businesses where maybe you only have the capacity to have 10 to 15 clients. I actually have a client the other day I was speaking to, and she's at a full capacity, right? And what we looked at is we looked at her current client base, and they all seem to be a little bit off of what her target market is now. She kind of grabbed a hold of anything she could while she was growing. And now we're working on, what are you worth, right? Let's look at your offerings. I think a lot of times, us very small business owners, and I've been right there at the start too, is that we kind of take our time for granted and we don't charge what we should. And we take on clients that maybe we're not the right fit for. Because we
Yes,
want to do right by them and do right by ourselves, right? Because, we've got families to feed. So
I totally
that's the
relate to
first
that.
thing
Yeah.
that's the first thing I recommend is just taking a look at your current client base and making sure that are these people the right fit for you and are they paying what you're worth? And maybe that's a couple conversations, and they're not always easy conversations, right? If you've had a client for a long time and you've got to say, hey, look, I gotta charge you 30% more because that's just what my services are going for right now. But that, in my experience, is probably the first place I go is what do we have currently and how can we just amplify that before we go down the route of all the painful marketing and advertising and the AI, technology assistance, which I think is very interesting. That's out there now too. But that's the first place I go.
Yeah, I totally relate to that, knowing your full worth. I handed in a job just this morning and I thought, which was a bit more complicated than I initially thought. It was a certified translation and I hadn't kind of, yeah, I knew that, but I hadn't kind of mentalized the time it would take to do the certified part of the job. And I thought, I think I've underpitched this. And, that 30% you said I totally relate to. Let's move on to trust and flow, Brandon. How can language pros, so language service pros, translators, interpreters, copywriters, that's my tribe. How can they rebuild trust and flow and start things just starting getting a bit wonky? So sometimes culture gets ignored and communication breaks down and collaborations just go, through the window. How can we sort of rebuild the trust with our clients and maybe with our peers as well and workflow when things just start, going awry?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always about being really honest about what is the outcome. I mean, I think a lot of people get into business and they don't necessarily understand the outcomes that they want to achieve for their clients. And vice versa, the client sometimes enters a relationship with you and they have all these expectations in their head, but maybe they didn't communicate those to you. And so both of you are kind of on different islands, right? And so I think that's the first thing. And the good news is that AI can't do that. I know we talked a little bit about AI coming into the space, and it can't make those relationships. It can't build those relationships for you. So being able to just have a sit down with somebody and really going, hey, look, what are we trying to achieve first? And then once we figure that out, then comes some of the interpersonal skills, like making sure we're constantly talking about what that last outcome is. We're driving towards that, not getting sidetracked by anything else around us. But that's what I found, is that honest, very direct point of view. And a lot of people think direct and they immediately go, "Oh, he's going to be mean," and that's not what I'm telling anyone to do out there. Just making sure, to go back to the previous point we were talking about, that you don't get caught into something that you shouldn't have been in the first place. It's really important to set expectations, and then also make sure that the people you're doing business with are aligned with your values. The one thing we really focus on a lot at Capital Growth Partners is the people behind your business and the clients that you're working with. Because when you're a small business owner, that's everything. That can make the difference between you having an awesome week and you having a terrible week. Because either you've got clients that don't align with what your core values are,
Mm.
or you've got people on your team that don't align with those core values. So that's my recommendation, is really setting outcomes that make sense for you and make sense for the client, and then really being intentional about the people that you surround yourself with, and you're working with, because you spend a lot of time with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really relating to what you're saying, Brandon. Alignment with business partners. I've had business partners where it looks good on paper, and then we start working, we're like chalk and cheese. I mean, we're just at two opposite ends of the spectrum and, at each other's throats, and it just can't go on. So let's do a hypothetical case study. I'm a potential client and I come in to see you on a Zoom call or maybe a phone call or whatever, or better, your office maybe. What's the first thing you look at to diagnose the real issue with my business? Typically, it will be I feel stuck. I can't get my income above, X thousand dollars. My leads are drying
Mhm.
up. The work feels misaligned, the kind of thing you were just talking about. What's the first thing you do with me as a kind of, initial diagnostic to see what's going on with my business?
Yeah, we call it a business blueprint. So what I like to do is when I enter a relationship with anybody, I want to understand their business blueprint first, because I don't want to act like I know the ins and outs of their business and all the people in their business, because I don't, right? Everyone's a little different. Every business runs a little different, and there's a lot of different verticals that we work in. So the first thing I do is look at their people. Now this sometimes isn't, as intensive if they're a one-man shop. So we look at the people. The people are really important that you surround yourself with, in terms of your employees. Do you have the right people in the right seats? But more importantly, I don't just leave people as your employees, but if you're a one-man show, the people around you, what do your clients look like? What are their outcomes? Are you achieving the outcomes that they need you to achieve, or are you not? So we really look at either their entire team plus their client base, or we look at just the client base if they're just a one-man shop, right? The next thing we like to do is look at processes and systems. I find this one, particularly in our smaller businesses where someone maybe, a one man shop, or they've got a couple employees, but they're still relatively small.
Hmm.
They kind of keep everything in their head. They
Yeah,
know what they're doing, but they don't know how to articulate that to the rest of the people around them. So
got it.
we immediately try to identify if there's some broken parts in their processes and systems, and then we work to fix that. So what can we do to put things down on paper? What can we do to make sure that Sally knows what she's supposed to do when John's not in the office, right? So that's number two. We also look at your product. The reality is that you can have great people, you can have great processes and systems, but if your product isn't meeting the expectations of your customers, they won't want to work with you anymore. So we do look at the product and we look at surveying systems. If there's not a survey system where we can get feedback from customers, that's something I almost always try to implement immediately, because you have to get feedback from your customers, because ultimately, they're either going to fire you or hire you, right? And that's the simplest way to put it. So we
Totally.
really try to make sure that we have the product that people are looking for. And if we don't, not a big deal. We'll build it. We'll work with the client and we'll help build it out with them. But sometimes, specifically in entrepreneurship, people get so excited about what it is they originally envisioned that they can't get out of their own way. They can't say, look, people are telling me they want this, even though I'm offering this. So that's kind of the next step for us, is looking at the product. And then last but not least, probably everyone's least favorite is marketing. Unfortunately, if you do all three of those first things right, but you don't know how to articulate your worth to clients and build value outside of what your zone is,
Mm,
they won't know about you. And if they don't know
sure.
about you, they can't take advantage of your great product. So we do
Yeah.
work with marketing. I'm probably a little bit nitpicky there because I did run a marketing firm. But it's really important to message yourself right. It's really important to try to break through the noise. I think it has probably gone way up now, but people were seeing, gosh, 2,000, 3,000 leads a day or
Mm.
ads a day. Previously, it's probably in the tens of thousands now, if I had to guess, from the 3 years I've been out of the marketing game. But you've got to be able to break through that noise and really make sure that your product is being noticed.
Just one follow-up question from that, Brandon. I was relating to what you said about SOPs and people keeping, their IP in their head. I recently worked with a six-figure business owner who was doing SOPs. She hired her first project manager, which would be about 25% of her monthly revenue. So big steps.
Mhm.
The SOPs, I mean, what kind of processes and information would you most want to get down on paper for the other employees? This business owner who has everything in their head, who thinks they can do everything, doesn't like delegating. What is the sort of one, two, three, the ABC of SOPs for? I'm just interested in comparing it to the case study
Yeah.
of the client I just worked with. Yeah.
For sure. I think there's two areas that I usually gravitate towards first. The number one being the sales process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a word that people like to stay away from, especially I find the smaller business owners that don't think of what they do as sales. But we're all selling something at the end
Sure.
of the day. And so
Yeah.
what we try to work through is just, what is that process? How is it that you've been so successful and you've built this business to the point where you needed an employer to start helping you? And what is that sales process? So we dig into that. We put that down on paper. A lot of times we put it down in like a video format because people consume that pretty well. But generally speaking, from A to Z, from the time a client comes in, what happens? When the client comes into the pipeline, whether it's through a CRM, if you've got that going, or if it's just a form fill on your website, what do we do? How fast do we reach out to that client? What's the booking procedure like? Is there a discovery call, or do we go straight to billing them? How do we have that conversation about what their outcomes are? Did we even ask what they were trying to achieve from the call? So we really get that granular, and we try to get really nitpicky about what it is we're doing in the sales process. And hopefully we get so good at it that it doesn't feel like a sales process, but everyone
Mm-hmm.
has to have one. If you just say, hey, we've got this great product, go sell it to your team members, you're going to find out pretty fast that they are not equipped necessarily to sell exactly how you do. So that's number one. I think number two goes into the execution portion. So a lot of times, I've seen this a lot with my more mid-sized businesses where they've got a couple account managers, a couple people on different accounts with different customers, and they all do things a little bit differently. And some of them are very successful, some of them aren't. And it's because I think once we get past the sales process, there's no execution play at all. It's just, hey, we'll talk once a week, we'll figure it out, we'll put this down on paper. Maybe we don't put anything down on paper. It's all in my head. I'm communicating to the client this way, but other people are communicating to the client this way. So we really try to get granular about what happens after a sale is completed. And I think if you can get that down on paper, that journey from when a person becomes a lead to all the way through fulfillment, once project is completed, you've really got a good understanding. And that's something that's teachable at that point.
Mm.
But those two things I think are most important. If you don't have that, you're really going to struggle to scale your business or grow into that 6, 7 figure business that we were talking about.
So you used to run a marketing agency, you know your lead generation strategies. That's for sure. I have no doubt about that. Let's do a
Yep.
few quick fire questions, Brandon. What is one lead generation tip you abide by daily for yourself, your own business, Capital Growth Partners, and your clients, your
Yeah.
business clients?
I think one that is a must is referrals. And I'll give you kind of a case study there is that we were working when I was in the marketing space, when we were working with a client, it was a home services business and they had an incredible business, definitely brick and mortar, a little different than, what we're talking about here, but they had an incredible business. They had a really good product. They were struggling on the lead gen side. And really they weren't struggling. They thought they were struggling. But when we looked at how much they were spending versus what they were getting, it was actually it was great cost per lead. It was great for the area that they were in. And they were just frankly in an area where there was a ton of competition. So the
Mm,
way we pivoted, I could have told them to spend 2 or 3 thousand more dollars a month in advertising. They probably wouldn't have liked that. We actually just did a referral campaign. So we used their CRM for this, but I think even if you're a smaller business, you really need to call up all your clients and just talk to them about one, make sure that they're happy with the service, to the point we made earlier about making sure that people are satisfied, they're getting what they need out of the relationship. But once
mm,
they say absolutely 100%, you really need to ask them for more business. I can't think of any clients that I've ever had this conversation with that were happy with the service, by the way, that said, Brandon, I'm really not interested in helping you grow your business at all. I don't know why you called me. See you later. It just doesn't happen, right? Like
right.
people, if you give someone a good service, they want to help you expand your reach and they want to help you, as long as they can, connect you with other people that might
Mm.
need your service. So I think that's the golden rule for me. If I needed to restart from ground one, I would immediately start playing on some of those relationships that I already have and ask for other business if I know I'm doing a good job for somebody.
What is your recommendation for where that social proof should be posted visibly? Is it website? Is it LinkedIn? Do you have a kind of social proof protocol for those recommended word of mouth referrals? Yes, but what about written social proof?
Yeah, I think in today's day and age, you definitely need a virtual presence. I'm sure there are some really good sites that, like I think of like Upwork and some of those sites that people get, specific jobs on. I think you do need to be active on sites like those, but I think more from like an organic presence, I would push people to LinkedIn. I would push people to even I know it sounds old school, but Instagram and Meta in general, Facebook and Instagram are really just still like the top players for lead generation across most verticals, frankly. So I think having a presence there and talking about what you do, what we're doing right now, the video is
Mm,
really important. People want to hear the person that they're going to work with. They want to hear their voice. They want to
yeah.
hear that trusting nature. So I do think a lot of people post a ton of content on LinkedIn, which is great, but if you're not engaging in video, if you're not engaging in podcasting, and getting yourself out there, you're missing the boat a little bit. And I know that's very scary for a lot of people, particularly the introverts out there. I'm actually one of them. I don't love necessarily jumping on camera. It's not my favorite thing. It's been a muscle that I've had to train, but it's really taking my business to new heights, being able to have these types of conversations and frankly being comfortable enough to say, these are my vulnerabilities, but I know I do a really good job for you and I want to work with you. That right there is something that AI can't do. AI can do all the posting for you. It can do all the outreach. I think we all probably get a zillion LinkedIn's a day saying, hey, can I talk to you about my product? But being on camera and really being able to get your content out there by just having a genuine conversation is, I think, the next step for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree 100%. I'm an introvert as well. I don't like, I mean, this is okay because it's only you listening to me. I mean, this will be later go out to 50, 60, 70, maybe 100 listeners. But yeah, talking to a room full of 120 people feels different to how this feels because I'm just talking to you and no one else. Maybe my wife might catch a word or two outside. But Yeah, I was going to say, ask you about Google Business Profile. What about, do you recommend that clients have a Google Business Profile? Is that a good place to build social proof or duplicate social proof from website tab, what my clients say, or the LinkedIn recommendations tab? What do you think about Google Business Profile? Because that's something
Yeah,
I have clients come by and I say, hey, would you give me a referral on Google Business? And most of them do. A couple of people don't, but most people do comply. Is that a good thing to do or
absolutely. I think the only time I steer people away from Google is if you're not going to be on top of it. Because people can kind of tell like pages that aren't active. And this really goes for any social, right? I'm a
yes.
culprit of this. I'll give an example to everyone. Set up a Twitter. I told myself I'm going to tweet a couple times a day because that's the best way to hit that algorithm and get yourself in the whatever the flow is. But I just didn't keep up with it. And it just looks like if someone's looking me up and there's no activity and I've got like two followers, it's just not a great look. So I think Google business pages are great. I think the more reviews, the better. I do still think no matter what your business is, people are looking for validation from other people. There's a
Mm,
genuine trust that comes with seeing that 4.6, 4.8 star review. There's also a genuine trust in seeing a two-star review, right? So that's the only thing I really push to people is if you're going to open that door, you really got to walk through it and just make sure that you give it a little bit of your time. I know we're all stressed for time, but making sure that the content looks good on there. If your business is brick and mortar, having some pictures that actually look reasonably good. I've seen that before where people just aren't keeping up with it, and it looks a little trashy, frankly. But as long as you do a good job and you've got, the reviews coming in, there's some really good programs out there that help you get reviews. They'll just automatically send your clients a review. If it's a 5 or 4 star, you can then go, leave them a review. It makes it very easy. So yeah, I think all
mm.
that's amazing.
Absolutely. People still buy from people, right? P2P relation. I have a coachable framework and it's called the bridge. And the bridge method, the
Hmm.
R in the bridge is relationships, P2P relationships, H2H, all this AI. People, when have you ever sold consultancy to anyone you didn't have a personal relationship with? I mean, it's impossible, right? You have to have a
Exactly.
relationship, whether it's a product or a service. Brandon, in just one word, how would you describe, I'm going to say algorithmic AI, because that's a term I heard an entrepreneur I follow use. So instead of agentic, I'm going to say, or generational AI, I'm going to say algorithmic AI, because you mentioned the algorithm there on the Twitter anecdote. What's the first word that comes into your mind when I say algorithmic AI?
Yeah, I think I would say intuitive. I think the one thing I've noticed over the last several months, even, but more years, is that it's just getting more and more intuitive in the way that it speaks to us. I'll give you an example for me is that it knows me now. It knows my voice, it knows how I want to sound. I'm not a person that puts a lot of fluff on emails or posts or anything like that. I try to be very transparent with people. And sometimes that can be direct. And what I've noticed is it knows that now. It knows things I like, things I don't like. So it's a little scary, it's getting very intuitive. It's getting very smart. And I knew it would do that eventually, but originally when I first started playing around with this, 3, 4 years ago, I was even a little late to the game at that point. I was, oh, this is okay, but I'm still going to need to spend a lot of time here. And now I look at it and I go, wow, it's really knows me,
So
which is interesting.
does that mean you trained an LLM to sound like you when you do your posting and your branding and things? Is it trained to sound like you? And what did you do to train it? And which
Yeah, it's
LLM?
exactly it. So
Okay.
I'll give you an example. We use this for our websites for I run franchises for Rockbox Fitness, and so it's a boxing and hit training studio. So that's my other business. And we actually train the AIs on our website to know the specific locations and know the different answers that might go with the Rockbox in Franconia, Virginia versus the Rockbox in Kentucky, right? And so it's really interesting. And the way they set it up is very intuitive. You just go in there, it asks you to lay out, 17 to 20 things that the AI bot, you get to name the AI bot. We named ours Rocky, not very creative for Rockbox, but it it gives you the model to train it, and you answer all these questions, and then sometimes it'll ask you more questions. And as things come up, it continues to just press you for, hey, we had this scenario today, almost like an employee, right? And so
Mm.
that's what's been really impressive. I hadn't seen that before until we pulled the trigger on redoing all our websites, and that's been very interesting.
That's very interesting. And have you followed Alex Hormozy, who was very successful in the fitness space, $100 million leads, $100 million sales? He's just launching $100 million, is it sales process or something like that?
Yep. Yeah, I
Um,
saw that. I
yeah.
have. Yeah, I think he's great. And so I'm not too familiar with the new content he's come out with, the new book that's coming out, but
Mm.
super excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me too. Brandon, best investment you've ever made in your life? It could be a personal investment, could be a business investment. Best investment you ever made. What's the first thing that light bulbs in your mind?
Yeah, I will say a little plug here, but probably the strategic coach. It's an entrepreneurial group where it doesn't matter what size company you are. You can do $100 a month in revenue. You can do $10 million a month in revenue, and they split you up into different groups that are characterized by, your revenue and kind of what your business is in the vertical a little bit. But every quarter, I would go out to Chicago and meet with these folks, and the amount of learning and just frankly, the mental health that I got from it, just feeling like I wasn't so alone because entrepreneurship can be very lonely.
Yes, it can.
Nobody knows exactly what's going through your head. So sitting down with a bunch of people, not only talking business strategy, but then having drinks after in Chicago and just going, oh my God, that guy's going through the same thing as me.
Yeah.
Well worth the money. Not cheap, but I think anytime you can invest in yourself, whether it's a 1 or 2 day event or an entrepreneurial group that meets like that,
Mm.
I've never found that the ROI doesn't come back from stuff like that.
That's amazing. We'll get a link out to that for sure. One more final five question, Brandon. What is the best business advice you've given someone, maybe a client, or maybe you received yourself from a mentor, an entrepreneurial colleague, one of these masterminds? What is the best business advice you've handled, either given or received?
Sure. I would say always being truthful, and I think sometimes that comes off poorly at first, right? I'm not saying that we're all out there lying to our clients. That's not what I'm saying, but I think that oftentimes we fluff things or we don't necessarily say the hard things that we need to that we know are going to help that client break through. I'll speak for myself actually on this one. Is for a while when I first started, I was terrified to lose the client because that's our living, right? And so you sit there and oh, man, maybe I can say this about Sally Sue so that Jason isn't so hurt. But the reality is that if Sally Sue's a bad employee and she's hurting his business and he's paying me to say stuff like that to him, I need to say that. I need to say it now. And whether he does it or not isn't up to me, but that's my job, right? So I've come to be a lot more forward. And I think that goes back to integrity, which is always a big value for me as well, is making sure that you're following through on the commitments that you give your clients. So
Mm.
always being truthful, no fluff, just get it out there. And you'll also feel a lot better once you do that. You won't lose sleep anymore.
Yeah, I totally get that. And that's a question. You can control what information you give your client. You can't control what your client does with it, right? You just have to feel good
Exactly.
with yourself on the pillow at the end of the day. Um, okay, let's see. What's the key takeaway that you'd like my listeners? You know the tribe, it's language service provision. So they're all
Hmm.
translators, interpreters, copywriters. A little bit of disruption because of AI, which is I'm trying to lead the charge saying AI is not taking your work. It's a productivity tool. You can actually do your work faster by supervising the AI. What's the key takeaway from your perspective as a former marketing person now doing fitness, e-commerce? What's the biggest takeaway, the sort of number one notable nugget you'd like to people to
Totally.
leave with?
I will say, not to say everyone out there is an introvert. There's probably some extroverts out there, but what you need to do is just get out there, get your face in front of the people and the customers that you want to meet and greet with. And ultimately make sure that you're driving home the importance of relationships. AI is a tool. I think you said it well. The AI is a tool that if we ignore it and put our head in the ground, people aren't going to be successful. If you ignore a tool that's taking over an industry, eventually it'll run you over. But if you use that tool and you learn all the things surrounding AI, you're going to be just fine, especially if you get out there and do some of the things we just talked about by getting your face on camera, making sure that people feel that warm human heartbeat to your business versus just that algorithm. I think a lot of people, and maybe this is a hot take, but I think a lot of people are turned off by AI. I've talked to a lot of people that are very scared of it and they don't even want to get near it. And, I'm the consultant saying, hey, you should actually use AI for some of this. And so I think don't be scared, get out there, get your confidence up about what's going on in the world and be optimistic too. This is going to change the world and it's either going to run us over or we're going to ride along with it.
Can you believe that I have a colleague who up to this year was making six figures that still hasn't used ChatGPT, not once in his work? Can you believe that?
Wow.
Well, that's
Oh
pretty
my
big.
gosh.
My friend and colleague is 62, or he will be 62 at the end of the year. He still hasn't used an LLM in that way to sort of, get a first draft or something. Or I think that's was part of me says, well, how stupid can you be? Another part of me says, wow, that is really admirable. I really want to be like you, because that's I think that says a big thing about his relationship with tech and his generation. Perhaps he's 11 years older than me. So that's
Yeah.
an interesting an
That is
interesting
interesting.
angle.
He's
Yeah.
gonna he's gonna be a happy guy when he gets an extra vacation next year once he starts using it. It's gonna
I
save him a
think
lot of time.
so. I think so. Absolutely. Yeah, I'll tell him that. I'll tell him that. Brandon, where can my listeners connect with you? And do you have a lead magnet we can chomp up? Or how can we find out more about you, your expertise? Is it the website, LinkedIn? Is there a magnet we can grab?
Sure. Yeah, either way. LinkedIn is great. I'm Brandon Pflieger on LinkedIn. Even if you type in my previous last name, McKee, you'll still find me. But we do have our website. It's growsmartercgp.com. And there's a form fill there. You just click on it. It's going to reach out to me directly. We'll book a discovery call for 30 minutes and chat and see if we're the right fit.
Excellent. That's a great magnet. All right. Thank you so much to Brandon. Let's wrap it up for today's episode of Freelancer Training on how to find more direct clients. Stay tuned for more engaging discussions on the ever evolving landscape of language and digital marketing. Until next time, remember what I always say, stay on your game and future proof your career in the AI digital era. All the best from me signing off. And thank you very much to Brandon again for today's episode. See you next time.
Here's a fun fact about Jason. As a kid, Jason was heavily into magic, juggling, and ventriloquism. Thanks for tuning in to the How to Find More Direct Clients Than You Can Poke a Stick At podcast. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, why not head over to www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com to access all our tools and resources to monetize and future-proof your freelance translation business. And don't forget to hit the plus button in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, or subscribe in Spotify to be notified when new episodes drop. For regular tips and insights, business strategy, or marketing techniques straight to your inbox, please sign up at www.entrepreneurialtranslator.com.